Platformers! There are countless platformer games out there. Not so much nowadays, but back in the early 90s to mid 2000s, some would say they flooded the market. Some games were amazing. We got games of the likes of Super Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie, which are all fantastic games, and we also got games that are, well, the subject of today's video. Ty the Tasmanian Tiger is one of those titles that you'd always look at the shelf of your local Blockbuster and go, is this any good? Before eventually settling on your latest Nintendo or even Rareware title at the time. Oddly enough, I actually have some history with this game, as this, funny enough, is one of the first video games I ever played. I wasn't very good at it, but back when I was like 6 or 7, I popped this baby into my PS2 and kind of started my whole gaming career, so I owe a lot to this tiger. But all that's in the past. Will nostalgic feelings keep this game's flaws from bubbling to the surface, or is the game truly so bad that you had to literally be 5 in order not to notice his flaws? Let's find out, shall we? Ty began development in December of 2000, 1 month after I was born actually, almost like it was destiny I would revisit this title someday, under the development of the recently founded Krome Studios. Krome had only done a few games prior to Ty, mostly consisting of summer surfing games and Star Wars ports. This makes Ty their first foray into the platforming genre, and I hate to say it, but it really shows. Ty started out with a very, very small development team and a relatively new development team too. This sort of makes it understandable as to why the game that we got wasn't as polished as it could have been, but still I can't have something like that holding back my opinions of the overall game itself, so that's sort of a downfall on Ty's part. While Ty may have not been the most well-known or even impressive technical marvel to look at back in the day, Krome Studios has actually developed a lot over the years and have even developed games of the likes of Star Wars: The Force Unleashed, which is an incredible game if none of you have tried it yet. Whatever, we all have to start somewhere after all, and if you ask me, I think Krome knew that, as where they lacked in high-end graphics or even story or a household name, man, I'm not really doing these guys justice now, am I? They made up for in marketing. The commercial for Ty, the one that I remember at least, had him walking through a hospital full of other popular mascots at the time like Mario and Crash, who were, funny enough, Ty's rivals at the time. They were all in full body casks and shivering at the sight of Ty, which it was a creative idea, but that wasn't enough to save Ty. It received very poor critical rating, and even just the general player base thought the game wasn't all that great. Ty does have a small cult following, as it did receive enough buzz in recent years that it was eventually ported to the Nintendo Switch in early 2020, and it even has a couple sequels, so maybe Ty can see a comeback sometime in the near future. Hell, if Bubsy can get a remake after all these years, anything can happen. But enough with all the background stuff. How did the game fare with me? Well, let's start with the biggest issue, the story. One day, Ty is running through the forest with his Bilby friends and finds a cave where the mystical Bunyip Elder, what the fuck, tells him about the evil boss Cass, a cassowary hell-bent on collecting the 5 mystic talismans and... well, that's just it. His motivations are never really explained aside from him hating mammals for surviving the dinosaur age. I think. He supposedly wants to rule the country with his army of lizards, but that's all we ever really learn from him. We get a little snippet of info here and there after each world's boss, but it's never anything outside of stop Ty. The Elder then tells Ty that years prior, his family stopped Boss Cass from stealing the talismans by yeeting them into a portal and getting T-posed in along with them. Ty, after being rescued from the pit he fell into, tells this to his friend Mori, a sulfur-crested cockatoo, and his scientist friend Julius the koala. With their help, Ty begins his hunt for the magical frisbees, and the adventure begins. Honestly, I think that's my biggest issue with the game. The pacing of the story. Everything is told to us in under 5 minutes, and by the time you start, I'm left with a feeling of whiplash trying to piece the whole already thin plot together. Motivations are non-existent, and characters are so one-note that they feel more like how you would quickly describe somebody's characteristics at a party more than an actual fleshed-out character in a video game. For example, Ty is the plucky one-liner spewing hero who's blanker than a piece of wood, Julius is the smart one who's there more just to move the story along, and Mori is the sassy mentor who might have the most character in the game now that I actually think about it. But again, that's not really saying much. Throughout the game, we meet a few locals who help Ty on numerous times in order to receive the Thunder Eggs. This game's power stars, if you will. These characters are alright, not offering anything special, but still keeping the world's feeling somewhat lived in, if still a little bit bland. The absolute worst character in the game, though, is Sly. Ty's evil brother working for Boss Cass. I have no idea why he's evil or why Boss Cass let a mammal work for him, considering that mammals are the one thing he's trying to destroy in this world. He's this game's Shadow the Hedgehog, if you will. Even having a change of heart after getting his ass kicked in the final level that leads to him giving us the boomerangs to deliver the final blow on Boss Cass and eventually saving the day. While I personally have not played the other 2 games in the series, I do hope that they expand on the characters just a little bit more, because the ones that we got are interesting, just not as interesting as they could be. However, a lot of people play games for the gameplay and not the story, so how does Ty fare on that front? While it isn't anything outstanding, I for sure can say that I had mostly an enjoyable time playing through Ty. He controls like most platformers from the era, running and jumping through levels, but where Ty differs is with his trusty boomerangs. With these, Ty has a weapon to deal with enemies from afar, and he has the ability to glide short distances once you gain 2 of them, making platforming a million times easier. Throughout each level, Ty can find these nifty golden cogs that, once you have collected 15 of them at a time, Julius can make a new rang for Ty to use. These range from simple upgrades like the Zoomerang that allows boomerangs to travel twice the distance to snipe targets, or the Multi-Rang, which can be thrown an infinite amount of times without stopping, however the distance is very lacking. On the flip side, Ty can also throw boomerangs like the Kaboomerang, which are a literal nuke, and the Chronorangs that slow time. I knew it. He actually is a Time Lord. Ty even gets a special Aquarang that can be used underwater, and oh my god, these underwater controls are amazing! They're very close to the Zora mask and Majora's Mask if I had to compare them to anything, and I'd even say Ty almost controls better than that. You speed up by tapping the jump button over and over, and this allows for high-speed swimming that makes traversing the waters actually a fun time in this game. Along with his boomerangs, Ty also has a bite attack, mostly used for scaling these drones that are found in only a handful of levels, and for taking out armored foes. In each level, there are multiple missions that yield a Thunder Egg. These missions range from collecting 300 opals, or essentially coins, finding all the 5 captured bilbies, or even rescuing Miss Koala's children from a burning forest, or a race at the end of a level under a strict time limit, for example. These aren't really anything to write home about, but I can say without a doubt that the 300 opal mission can burn in hell! Seriously, these levels are way too big to have this many collectibles spread out. It's so hard to keep track of them all, and I usually end up spending an hour and a half trying to find those 3 opals that I missed at the end of these dumb water levels that can bite me. I'm not exaggerating, this game has some decent music, but when you have to hear the exact same track over and over again 40 times, it starts to become ear rape. I'm not exaggerating. Another big issue with the game is the camera. It is so close on Ty that in these larger levels, you can't make out anything around you. It's so close up that you can walk right past an opal or even a golden cog, which are very easy to spot, mind you, and not know it. One of the biggest issues that I kept running into is after I would break one of these crates that contained 3 to 5 opals, I would get what I thought was all of them, but one just so happened to fly right off camera, and since I didn't see it at the time, I would miss it and have to go through the entire level over again. That is bad game design. If you ask me, one of the worst things that you can do in a game is bore the player, because if the player's bored, he's gonna remember being bored next time he tries to pick up the game and might pick something else, which is going to really hurt your brand if you're trying to make a series. Okay, let's get off the bad stuff. This game actually did have a lot that I thought was very interesting. There are more than just these big open levels. For example, levels like Liar Liar Pants on Fire or Walk in the Park are much shorter and linear levels, which I think lends itself better to the gameplay Ty was trying to have. And not all huge levels are actually that bad. There was one called Outback Safari where you ride on the back of the previous world's boss fight, and it really did lend itself to a new interesting gameplay mechanic. Since the boss was so big and you're moving around a level in almost like a rodeo style fashion, it made itself actually playable to have a big open level. Collectibles were easy to spot, and overall, I just thought that any big level in the game should have a gameplay change to actually accommodate the level size and collectibles in it. That brings me to another point. The fact that we only used the first world's boss as a gimmick in a later level was kind of jarring to me, because later on we end up fighting a giant mechanized shark in a level that is very reminiscent of Jaws, and even a giant gorilla robot, which I thought would have been awesome to have a cool punch-out styled boss fight at the end of the game. However, this is something I can kind of look past, because since this was Chromesoft's first attempt at a platformer, I can understand them trying to throw everything at the wall, seeing what sticks, and not really fleshing out every idea they had. While I thought the actual bosses that we fought looked cool, the boss fights themselves were a little lacking. They were essentially mini puzzles trying to figure out exactly what you had to do to injure the boss directly, as Ty's boomerangs themselves most of the time weren't enough. Whether it was luring this giant bull into these pillars by jumping out of the way at the last second, melting this giant gorilla in an icy lake to try to drown him, or even trying to explode this mechanized shark with TNT, oh my god, they were very simple and samey once you understood the puzzle. And at the end of every single boss fight, it was always the same spiel. The boss was misunderstood, and they had a mystical tic-tac hiding on their person, which essentially helped the game move along. The whole game had this empty feeling about it, boasting only really 10 original levels, not counting boss levels or the hub world. It just wasn't that long of a game, and kind of left me wishing there was a little more to it. Boasting a pitiful 8 hours for a 100% completion file. Careful when you buy this thing. If you spend any more than $20, if it's not the Switch remake, you might be getting ripped off, because I can beat this game in an afternoon and I'm not even that good at it. I can cut Chrome Studios some slack, as this was their first attempt at a platformer game, as they mostly worked on surfing games or Star Wars ports, and I suppose it was better of them to make a shorter game as opposed to making a longer game, as if the gameplay wasn't fun and the story wasn't interesting, you would risk boring the players as opposed to giving them something that they might look back in fondness on in the future. But with story and gameplay, that only makes up a small portion of what a game is actually about. Let's look at my personal favorite part of Ty. The highlight of Ty by far is the music. The OST has an awesome mix of more calm traditional tunes using instruments native to Australia and rockin' tunes that I was shocking to find in an obscure game such as this. My personal favorite was from World 1's Boss and Walk in the Park, both tunes that heavily use guitar and rock to make the player get pumped for an adventure. While I can't really say the same for level themes like Snow Worries or Bridge on the River Ty. These themes either just didn't jive right with me, or I felt were just unfitting for the level they was placed in. Overall, I would highly recommend you guys give the soundtrack a listen, as it is on YouTube and Spotify. It isn't anything amazing or even groundbreaking, but it'll keep you humming and keep your toes tapping through the entire adventure for sure. I will warn you that some of these tunes are very short, so the song may repeat a few times per track, but that might be a plus for some of you. Overall, I'm gonna give Ty the Tasmanian Tiger a somewhat mediocre recommendation. It was so lacking in the story department, and the gameplay was not as tweaked as it could have been. And it was just such a short experience that it really didn't leave me that much did not leave me with that great of an impression when I was all done with it. The positives I can say about Ty, though, is that the music was so fantastic. And the gameplay, if you can get used to it, because it is a bit finicky in the beginning, is something that I know you will find enjoyable, especially the boomerang mechanic. I thought that was really, really fun and actually made me want to go collect all the golden cogs in the game. Personally, I would say if you can find a copy of this game for a somewhat cheap price, pick it up. I'm sure it's not going to break the bank too much for you. I got my copy for about 15 bucks at a local vendor, and play through it, just to say you did. There are 2 more games in the series, so obviously this game had something going for it. We'll actually be looking at those games at a later date. As for right now, we have some more platformers we're going to take care of, everybody. That's right, these reviews are going to be a mainstay on the series, and I'm actually going to be starting with a failed mascot platformer marathon. I don't know if the text lined up that way. I'll do it in editing. That's right, any mascot who made its debut in the late 90s to early 2000s and really made a mark in the gaming scene, but isn't really around that much today, is up for grabs. I already have a few reviews already lined up, but for next time, I will see you all back right here for my review of Ratchet & Clank on the PS2. However, we're going to be looking at the PS3 remake because those visuals are mwah. See you all then.